wow.
Oh, hang on.
What's going on here? This is extraordinary.
She appears in the newspaper.
Oh no, I dread to think.
They actually form an incredibly important part of the puzzle of your family tree.
Oh wow, that's quite racy for my family, if I may say so.
Well, it's very racy.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's quite sad, isn't it?
Oh no.
Clive.
What's happened now?
Welcome to Questions and Ancestors with me, Alex Jones, brought to you by Ancestry. Now, for years in my family, there's been a rumour that we've somehow related to a former mayor of Paris. I think every family has the stories that have been passed down, changing in detail with each generation that tells them. Well, in this podcast, we've asked some famous faces about the blank pages in their family history so that we can help them discover the truth about their past. The person with the answers is Ancestry senior genetic genealogist Laura House, who will be sharing what her team has uncovered. Now, I am with you guys. I've not seen the research yet, so I'm just as invested as you are, but maybe not quite as invested as my guest. So in the hot seat today is an award-winning comedian, broadcaster, writer and former barrister. He swapped courtrooms for writers' rooms in the late 70s and 80s, writing for legendary shows like Not the 9 O'Clock News and Alas, Smith and Jones. He's now better known for his roles in charge of BBC Radio 4's Loose Ends and setting the tasks on the iconic improv show Whose Line Is It Anyway? And he's my guest today. It is, of course, Clive Anderson. Clive, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much.
Really good to see you. So let's start with, who is the person in the Anderson household who's most into the family history?
Well, as it happens, my wife has been investigating her ancestry recently. And I'm rather frightened I'm not going to be able to compete with her because her family, as it happens, has plenty of records going with it. Her father was a military man and his father before him, and her mother was a vicar's daughter. And so there's lots of records of the military units that go back quite a long time. Yeah. And because each parish has its record of who the vicar is or the curate and so forth. And she's tracked back a long way now and very grand. There's very grand stuff. I don't think my family's going to get anywhere close to that.
Well, who knows? Let's start then, Clive, with what you do know.
Well, the little I know really is my father's family comes from Scotland. He was Scottish, and so I knew his father, my grandfather, and I know that his father was a minister in the sort of Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland, the Wee Frees, I think they're sometimes called, and the names of the churches kind of changed around a bit. So, and I think that represented a bit of an elevation in the family from out of poverty, as far as I can see, which, I mean, being a minister in a church doesn't sound like winning the lottery, but it's something if you're living hand to mouth. And so I think as a result of him being a minister, that meant that my grandfather, I think, managed to get a scholarship to go to the university. And then my father hit harder times and had to come to London. And so that's what I mostly know. I know relatively little about my mother's family. I knew them growing up, her mother, my aunt, and a great aunt as well. They're all women. I come from a family of women in England. There were no men alive by the time I came along.
That's no bad thing, Clive. So is that the side that you would like to focus on?
Well, I'd like anything that I don't know is interesting. It might be exciting. It might be, I don't know. I'm ready for anything.
They could be good, they could be bad.
Yes, or ugly as well.
Clive Anderson Uncovered. Here we go. This will become a digital record of your family history, which Excellent. Is a lovely thing. You are about to add to it in a way, aren't you, by doing this podcast? So we ask all our guests to bring something unexpected, a record or a certificate or something. What did you choose?
Well, I was rummaging around in badly kept boxes of things which got shoved around in a file that we had. But I did find this photograph. It was me in the primary school football team. I'm the blonde kid standing next to the teacher, Mr. Gurmin, with a moustache. I don't have a moustache.
Oh, wow.
Could
I see it,
I'd be
Clive?
10 or 11 in that photograph.
And were you a keen footballer back in the time?
Well, do you know, I've been playing football all my life, then and now. So I still play it at my very, very advanced age. But in a sense, though, that's sort of the high point of my footballing career, if I think about it, because that was the school team. There was nothing much higher that you could be in at that point. After that, I've played football never at the highest level. And I think I was quite a sensible child in that my friend John Lacey, who's in that, and I used to play a lot of sports together, and he was better than me. He was better footballer than me. And I sort of thought, well, if I'm not in a sample of two, I'm not the best one, I'm never going to get very far.
Do you know the funny thing, though? You can still see there's a cheekiness to you even then, Clive. I mean, you can see that. So
Yes.
maybe you weren't destined to be a footballer.
Well, I don't know. I think what held me back, apart from lack of talent and application, is that I damaged my cruciate ligament just after that photograph was taken.
Aw.
But I've managed to soldier on, even by strapping my leg. And it's now, however many, 50, 60, nearly 70 years old.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And you've got a piece of pottery.
A piece of pottery, which I made. And you can tell it's me because it's got the name Clive in the bottom. I don't think I would have done that. I don't think it's my signature because, well, maybe I did. I don't remember that. But I made that in the infant school. So I was 6 or 7. And the wonder to me about this is that it's survived. So it was at home with my parents, and it was on a sort of kitchen windowsill for a long while. Not exactly doing a job, but it wasn't hidden away or tidied away. And at some point I must have taken it from that house. And I've lived in a variety of houses, and an awful lot of things I've owned has broken or lost. So this is a survivor. It's like a bit of archaeology, really. Ideally, for comedy purposes, I should now put that on the edge of the table
and it should fall off
and smash. But
exactly
I'm going to avoid that.
Oh, my goodness. OK. Well, Clive, hopefully we'll find out lots about your family history today. It's a good time, therefore, to welcome Laura House, who's our senior genetic genealogist. Laura, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
So we've got Clive here, very excited, poised for the results. Clive took an Ancestry DNA test. And maybe the first thing we should do is look at the results. Is he, in fact, Scottish, or are there other mixes in there?
He's very Scottish. Clive, you're very Scottish.
All right. Okay.
And exactly as you would have suspected on your dad's side, completely Scottish.
Yes.
Completely Scottish on your dad's side.
Do we have a percentage?
50%. He's 50% Scottish.
So I'm 50% Scottish coming
On his
from my
dad's
father,
side.
yes.
But unexpectedly, perhaps, 21% Scottish on your mother's side.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that, I think, was a surprise to you when you first saw it, wasn't it?
I certainly was not aware, and I'm still not really aware of any Scottish connection in my mother's family. She's no longer alive, and nobody else is really that would know much about it, because her father died shortly before I was born. I know at my parents' wedding, her father and grandfather were still alive, but the arrival of me and my sister must have killed them off in some way. So I don't have much connection with the male members of the family, or indeed where 2 or 3 generations back they were in London, and nothing much was on record as far as I know of her family.
Laura, do you have anything to add about the DNA?
Yeah, so when you take an Ancestry DNA test, it's for the listeners at home, it's a simple saliva test, and your DNA is then compared to populations around the world, and you're given a percentage breakdown of the populations your DNA most closely resembles. So, for example, that's why you've got 21% Scottish on your mum's side. And sometimes when countries have a history of intermigration with each other, like England and Scotland, you can end up with DNA assigned to that region, even if you don't necessarily have a recent ancestor from there, because the DNA looks so similar.
Yeah. Okay.
And we are going to come back to your Ancestry DNA results, Clive, because they actually form an incredibly important part of the puzzle of your family tree.
Oh, wow.
Laura's incredibly good at building tension.
Yeah.
But before we dive into your maternal side, let's talk a bit about what you've been doing recently, because of course you do Loose Ends on BBC Radio 4, have been for a couple of decades now, haven't you?
Getting on for, yes.
Getting on
seems
for.
like that.
Time goes so fast, doesn't it? But also you've been busy writing a book.
I have. I haven't spoken about this yet because it's
exclusive.
Yes, it is actually. Yes, no. I only do things when people suggest them to me or persuade me to them. So it's called. I think my name is Brody, and Brody is a dog. So I'm essentially the ghostwriter for the dog.
And what sort of dog is Brody?
Brody's a terrier.
Nice.
I have. In real life, I have owned more than one terrier, 3 terriers in a row now. So, but for legal reasons, I must stress this is a fictional dog, and it bears no relation to any of my dogs, and they have never committed any of the offences.
I can tell that you've been told you have to say that. Yes.
Well,
so Brodie then. So is it sort of a fictional autobiography from Brodie's perspective?
It's not as grand as an autobiography. Even he wouldn't claim that. It just takes incidents, and it's my attempt really to try and imagine what a dog makes of the human world, because I just feel that things happen to them. They're suddenly lifted up, they're put in a car, they get to the other end, they don't know where they're going.
Where can we get the book? Is it out yet in the shops?
It's not out yet. No. I'm jumping the gun a bit, but it'll be out in the autumn.
Lovely.
It might be the sort of book that coming up to Christmas might be for the dog lover in your life.
So we can pre-order the book and still listen to you, of course, on BBC Radio 4.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, you've waited long enough. So, Laura, can you tell us then what you have found out about Clive's maternal Scottish ancestors?
I would love to. So we'll be talking today, Clive, about your great-great-grandmother.
Right, okay.
Her name was Elizabeth MacDonald, classic Scottish name.
Yes.
And she was born in about 1824 in Glasgow. She moved to England as a young woman and settled in Bristol, where she met an engineer named George Macready.
All right.
And George Macready was also Scottish, so they may have known each other before, or they may have met in Bristol. And they didn't legally marry to begin with.
Okay.
But they lived together.
That's quite racy for my family, if I may say so.
Well, it's very racy.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because what they may have considered this to be is what in Scotland was referred to as an irregular marriage.
Yes.
Like a civil partnership, or what was that?
Not quite like a civil partnership, but it was more of a situation where a couple would either have an informal agreement that they were going to get married someday.
Like an engagement.
Like an engagement, but except they would consummate, and that would then legalise. That would essentially legalise it in the eyes of
Spicy.
Scottish
Was
law.
it called a handfast marriage in Viking and Anglo-Saxon times?
Well, in other cultures, they wouldn't have needed a church wedding because they weren't Christian.
All
but
right.
in this context, this was considered a valid marriage by the Christian church. So a couple could promise each other that they were going to be married.
Yeah.
And then in Scottish law, that was considered to be a legally binding marriage. Hard to prove, of course, if it comes down to it, if there's a dispute over inheritance or something.
But also ideal if there's a lot of lust involved.
If you're in a rush,
Yes.
it works just fine.
But hang on,
Perfect.
you say in Scottish law, but they were in Bristol, so
Exactly.
were they bringing Scottish law with them and say...
They were bringing it with them. And of course, the marriage wouldn't have been recognised in English law. So this was a little bit of a risk for them, especially considering they had a baby before they were legally married.
Wow.
So in English
I think
law,
my mother would be shocked to learn this.
well, just remember in Scotland, perfectly legal.
Okay, all right.
And so the baby in English law would have been considered illegitimate, but in Scotland would not.
They sound like fun.
Yes. So MacDonald and Macready got together in Bristol.
Yeah, they had a baby.
Yes.
And then when she was pregnant with their second child, they got legally married in the church.
Phew. Yes.
And so the first record I want to show you is their parish marriage register. So we've got their names at the top. And then at the bottom, you can see where they've signed their names.
Yes. So George Macready has signed all right, but it's only the mark of Elizabeth MacDonald. So...
Illiterate?
So they weren't. So she wasn't even educated enough to write her own name.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Gosh,
that's quite sad, isn't it?
but he's an engineer, he says, and she's nothing. It's a blank of what her rank of profession is.
Yes, and we often see this with records of women.
But presumably she couldn't write, even if she had a job, she wouldn't be able to write it.
Somebody could have written it for her, couldn't they?
So
Could
the
have put in,
document,
housemaid or
Yes, of
whatever
course.
job it might be.
So the document would have been handwritten by the clergyman.
Yeah.
And what often happens in these sorts of documents is that women's occupations, where they had them even, are erased. Because they
Why?
weren't considered worthwhile recording.
But then it gives people a full picture.
They weren't thinking ahead, were they?
Yeah.
They weren't thinking of
Right.
us.
Well, as I mentioned, my wife tracking her ancestry back, she's often looked at the female side because of this.
Yeah.
Because there's a story that's not as well known.
Yeah, and that's
All
often
right.
the case with female ancestors.
Okay.
Wow.
Oh well,
Okay.
that's quite exciting. So they
So they get
They've
married.
got together in Bristol.
They're now legally married.
Yeah.
They've made it official.
They made it official. Oh, maybe the children will go to school, so they'll be able to read and write. Well,
Let's hope
unlike
so.
the mother.
How many children then?
So if we jump ahead to the 1851 census,
Yes.
For those who are listening at home, the census is taken every 10 years, and in England and Wales you can get censuses on Ancestry between 1841 and 1921, and they're an amazing snapshot of a family's story once every 10 years. And so we have your family on the 1851 census.
George Macready, we've still got him.
Right.
Elizabeth. And now these were names underneath. Are they all the children?
They are the
think?
children.
So there's Mary Jane, Georgina, spelled in a rather complicated way, Georgina, Elizabeth, George. So there's 4 children. Yeah.
Yes. Now, there's a reason that I introduced Elizabeth as your Scottish ancestor and not George.
Why is that?
Because George Macready is not your great-great-grandfather.
Oh, no.
Clive.
What's happened now?
The plot thickens.
You said there was a love match between 2 people.
There was.
Yes.
And unfortunately, George became quite sick with tuberculosis
Oh, I
during the
see.
1840s. So actually, at the time this census was taken, George is ill with tuberculosis.
Right.
They have all these young children, and it must have been a real struggle for them.
Yes.
Dealing
Oh,
with
I
this
feel
illness.
guilty now. For the da-da-da.
So why do you say he's not my my ancestor?
Well, George dies in the 1850s.
Yeah.
And not long after that, Elizabeth becomes pregnant again.
Right.
How not long after that?
Long enough. It's not George's baby.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I see. So there's an extra to these ones, or the
Yes, in addition to these children,
yes.
she's having another baby.
Uh-huh.
And it's long enough after George's death that we know he's not the father of the
and
baby.
it'll be obvious to everybody,
Okay.
presumably.
Obvious to everybody, yes.
Right. She's quite a one. This
Busy.
ancestor of mine.
Elizabeth has quite a hard time after George's
Yes.
death. As you can imagine,
Well, 4 young children.
Yeah.
difficult to earn a living as a
Yes.
single mother. Women weren't paid very much.
No.
And
And
Elizabeth
also illiterate, of course.
And
so,
illiterate.
You know.
She
Limited
might have learned
options.
some reading and writing by then,
Potentially.
helping with the children.
she may have done, but it would have been difficult for
Yeah,
her to
okay,
manage.
all right.
And so in 1854, she appears in the newspaper.
Oh, no.
And I want you to
I dread to think what you're...
read out this article.
Elizabeth Creedy was charged, with stealing a glass, the property of James Phelps. The complainant stated that he kept a spirit shop and on Monday served the prisoner with some pale ale in a glass. Immediately upon her leaving, he missed the glass, and in going to her house with a constable, he found it in her bedroom. Was that a legal search? I suppose it was. The prisoner, who is a widow with 3 children, appeared sensible of the painful position in which she had placed herself, and the case not being pressed against her, she was discharged with an admonition. All right.
Oh, well, that's good. So they didn't charge her because they felt a bit sorry for her.
So where was this? Because admonishment is a sentence of the court in Scotland.
Yeah, so she went to court in Bristol.
In Bristol, yeah.
In Bristol. And there were 3 men presiding. And this must have been an incredibly intimidating experience for Elizabeth.
Yes.
Everything is at stake for her here. If she goes to prison,
what
will
happens to the children?
babies? Yeah.
Yes.
She has all these young children. And so the fact that the court saw her circumstances, recognised the desperation, and let her off with a warning, I think tells us something about how compassionate they must have felt.
Well, it's only a glass. And that James, I'm cross with him because, he went after her with the constable to the house just to find a glass.
Yeah, but you went to prison for a lot less in those days.
How do you
hang on,
feel?
What date was this?
This is 1854.
1854. So it wasn't. She wouldn't have been sent to Australia or anything like that. That wasn't in the catalogue for a glass, would it?
I think that was still happening for theft at that point.
Not for a value of that low, though. I think.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you as an ex-barrister, Clive?
Well, I'm sorry to see that she was on the wrong side of things, but I with you though as well. I think it is. Sometimes you see sentences handed out and how stern things were in the olden days. Like there, theft. You go back far enough, was a capital offence. You could be executed for it. But then it was a particular value, and courts and juries worked very hard to make sure the value came in at lower than the limit. And here they've decided, well, you're not quite, it looks like you're guilty, but no, just don't do it again.
Yeah.
We're not finding you guilty. Don't do it again. So, there's no charge proved against her. So I think she probably forgot that she had her glass in her hand, and she was embarrassed that she put it in her pocket and or handbag or whatever, and went home with it. Easy mistake.
We've
to make.
all done it.
We've all done it.
Yeah. And sometimes if you haven't finished your glass of wine and the pub's shut in, I've taken the glass home in the past. Is that the same?
I don't think she was saving much money by taking it, because she was going to drink the ale in the spirit shop anyway. So they're going to provide her with a glass every time. Maybe it was for the children.
But I'm glad that it's a little bit of a sign of kindness, isn't it? That they looked at her and thought, actually, let's just let her off. She's got 4 young children. She's pregnant. All right. She's obviously struggling. Okay. That's a nice sign.
All right.
That humanity's okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Elizabeth, does she have the baby? And is she with somebody at this point?
So at this point, there's no sign of a man in the household. Oh. She's having these children, and there's no evidence of who the father of the children is. But meanwhile, in another part of the county, there is a man named Thomas Whittle Boulter. And he is a baker, and he has a wife named Esther and several children, older children. And he appears in one census with his wife and children, and in the subsequent census, he's living with Elizabeth.
Oh, hang on.
What's going on here? This is extraordinary. She's now with this baker.
Yeah, so she's now with Thomas.
At least there's bread to eat.
Exactly.
And what's nicer
than freshly baked bread? Yeah. Nothing better.
She knew which side her bread was baked on with him, obviously. So,
very good.
How do you link that up with my mother? How many generations are we away from?
So Elizabeth MacDonald is your great-great-grandmother.
Right.
And one of the children she has after her husband dies is your great-grandmother, also named Elizabeth. So we'll call her Elizabeth Jr. Yes. So Elizabeth Jr. is your great-grandmother. And if it wasn't for your DNA results, Clive, we would have hit a total dead end at this point.
Yes.
But because you took an Ancestry DNA test, I was able to look at your DNA matches. So when you take a test, you are matched with everyone in the database with whom you share DNA. Yeah. So you have a list of your genetic relatives. And you have a whole group of genetic relatives who are related to Thomas Whittle Boulter.
Well, not surprising. He's
your great-great-grandfather.
Yes.
So he is the man. He is the father of those children. He's at least the father of Elizabeth. So it's really interesting to fill in those blanks in the story where usually we would assume, oh, he's a stepfather, he's adopted the children, he's just done a generous thing. But actually, he may have been the biological father.
Well, recently I started to make soda bread because of an interview I did with somebody. It was obviously in my genes all along.
It was destiny.
It was in the blood. Yeah. How does that feel, though? Because it is quite a bizarre experience, isn't it, having some of those gaps in your family filled, Well,
thank you very much for opening up this story. What happened next?
Elizabeth and Thomas are together for the rest of their lives.
Oh, that's something.
We finally got to stability and,
Finally. Even though Ethel's furious, at least it lasted.
Ethel's fuming, but Elizabeth finally has some stability in her life. Yes. And of course, if Thomas hadn't acknowledged these children, they would have probably grown up in desperate poverty. Yeah. So between the two of them, they have pulled these children out of poverty, given these children the best possible life. And Thomas and Elizabeth are together until the very end. In her final years, Elizabeth gets sick, of course, and Thomas is unable to work because he is looking after his wife.
Aww.
And he appears in the newspaper because he's gotten himself into a little bit of debt. Yeah. And...
oh, you've just got more and more dirt you're digging up on my poor family. Thomas Whittle Boulter, newsagent. Administration order was applied for in this case. Boulter said his wife was very ill and he could pay nothing just now. It was stated that his debts amounted to £31 7 shillings 9pence. His Honour, so it's in whichever court, asked Boulter what he was doing for a living. Boulter, nothing at all. I'm not earning 8 shillings a week. His Honour, you're a lucky man then to be able to live on that. You must pay 10 shillings in the pound at 6 shillings a month. So he's earning 8 shillings a week and he's paying 6 shillings a month.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure who's going to be able to pay that.
But it tells you a lot about him, doesn't it, as a person? that he's caring for his sick wife.
Yeah.
And obviously there's all the children still there. And we don't know how old they are, of course, by that point, but quite young.
Some of the youngest ones are still young.
Yeah, quite young. And then poor man is having to feed the children, look after his wife, not earn himself. And then he's in the paper for being in debt.
This is Oxford County Court. And he's a newsagent at this point. Yeah.
Yes, so after Thomas and Elizabeth got together properly, after they moved in together, they left Bristol for Oxfordshire and started a new life there.
Yes.
And it isn't until Elizabeth becomes unwell that Thomas really gets into financial trouble.
Mm.
Elizabeth does eventually die, and Thomas is with her at the end.
All right.
And then Thomas moves to London. And he lives out the rest of his life in London. And he died in 1899 when he was 79 years old.
Gosh, that's a good age back then, isn't it? So, Clive, at the beginning, the point was to find out about your maternal Scottish ancestors. Do you feel that has sort of scratched the itch a little bit?
Well, it's interesting because, you've got two parents, obviously 4 grandparents, 8, and then it gets so, there's so many different lines to follow down. But it's quite a lot of sadness in that story. I'd like to think things have improved a bit as the years have gone by. And I mean, anything else, in addition to anything else, just the fact that my parents met at all is a sort of an odd thing. My father came from Glasgow to London, and my mother was living in London, but there was no reason for them ever to meet. They were but for the war, and they were both in the RAF. And my mother was engaged to somebody else who died. He was a fighter pilot and died. My father was in Bomber Command, and they. This is a bit off the ancestry point, but there's such a sort of freak fact that they met on some RAF camp and but for the war they wouldn't have been there, and her fiance wouldn't have died in the process. No. So it's a sort of random coming together.
Yeah. If Elizabeth hadn't moved from Glasgow to Bristol and met Thomas, you wouldn't be alive today.
No. Well, we're all results of endless freak, and unless you happen to marry the girl next door, the boy next door, it's random events that bring you together.
What really stands out for you then in what Laura has said? Is there an element of what we've heard here that you think, oh yeah, that's the nugget that will stay with me?
Well, certainly the nugget of them not being married, coming together, and then having a relationship that was separate.
But at least now you can have a conversation and you've got something to offer, you see? I
think I've raised myself in the world.
Does it make you want to find out a little bit more?
I've got a bit of time. I think I'll have to concentrate on this a bit more and see if I can find some lines that don't have illegitimacy and poverty and trauma and up before the beak for a variety of offences and mismanagement of money.
Hey, there's no shame in it.
No. I can see my genetic inheritance coming out somewhere. As long as I can track myself back to the baker, I'm going to be. I'll be finding relatives everywhere.
Yeah, and have another go at making soda bread because it's there somewhere. There's a talent in there. It's in the genes.
Yes.
Clive, thank you ever so much.
No, thank you, both of you.
Now, if Clive's journey has inspired you to find answers about your own family tree, then you can start searching your own family history at ancestry.co.uk. And please do follow Questions and Ancestors on your favourite podcast platform. We would love for you to leave a comment or a review to help others discover us and maybe also spark their own genealogy journey. Questions and Ancestors is brought to you by Ancestry. Well, thanks so much for listening to the very end of the episode. And don't tell anybody, but this is the bit that I prefer, where I get to swap seats and find out a little bit more about my own family history. So, Laura, hopefully you've got some gems for me. We've already heard about my great-grandfather's untimely end. But then the rumour that is rife in our family is this thing that my great-great-great-grandfather, maybe my great-great-grandfather, was the mayor of Paris. Now, obviously, as a big fan of Emily in Paris, I am willing this to be true, but I have a feeling it probably isn't. True or false? Go on.
It's such an interesting story, and when we last talked, you pointed out something very interesting about Louis Jones's name. So Louis Jones being your great-grandfather.
Ah, yes. And I said it was quite unusual, really, for a South Walian to be called Louis.
Absolutely. And in the 19th century, you're far more likely to get a Lewis Jones than a Louis Jones.
That's true.
So I was really interested in this. And I found Louis Jones in the 1901 census of Wales.
Okay.
He is living with both his parents. This is the last census taken before the death of his father, Joseph Henry Jones. So Louis is your great-grandfather.
Yes.
And Joseph is your great-great-grandfather.
That's right.
And Joseph's wife Sarah is your great-great-grandmother. And they're all together on this 1901 Wales census record. Now, the handwriting's a little scruffy, but I want you to take a look at the census record and have a look at Joseph's birthplace.
Okay, let me just find him. What does that say?
Would you like me to read it to you?
Please.
It's very, very rough handwriting on this document, but Joseph Henry Jones is there, and then his birthplace.
France! Hang on a minute. I knew it. Oh my goodness. British subject, France.
Yep.
How?
He was born in France.
Ah, oui, très bon.
And I have to say, I'm eating humble pie with this, because when you told me the story, I thought, there's no way. Wales to France.
It's a bit far-fetched, especially then. But how do you think, then, Louis came to be French?
Well, the next document I'm going to show you is really, really beautiful. Over the last few years, Ancestry has digitised hundreds of French civil records. And this here is the birth record of Joseph Henry Jones, your great-great-grandfather.
Oh my goodness. Hang on. Oh my gosh, it's all in French.
Yes.
Oh, I knew I loved a stripe. I knew there must be a reason for it. This is unbelievable. Have we had this translated?
So I know the key genealogical details from it.
Okay.
And it shows that there's some truth in the other parts of your family story, because there was something about an involvement in the gas industry as well, wasn't there?
Yes. Something to do with gaslights, we thought.
Yes. And this record shows that Joseph's parents were William George Jones and Maria Braben. And his father, William George Jones, who is your great-great-great-grandfather, he worked as a foreman at the gasworks. So there is some truth to that story.
Wow. I'm so fascinated to know how Joseph and his parents ended up in France.
It is so interesting. And while the reasons for this aren't clear, we might assume that it's work related. So something to do, this is not Paris, this is Nîmes. So
I've been to Nîmes last summer, honestly, and now I would have a complete different take on it.
Your great-great-grandfather was born there.
No.
And your family lived there. That's incredible.
Gosh, this is bizarre.
Oh.
Fantastic. Do you know what I love is, yes, okay, it did sound a bit far-fetched, but I actually thought that you were going to say, Alex, I'm sorry to burst the bubble, but you have no French relatives, no French connection whatsoever.
Wales all the way down.
But aha, I knew it. I love a bit of linen, I love a stripe, and I feel quite French, and this is why. Thank you, Joseph.
And there's a chance, of course, that Joseph would have spoken French, because it looks like they spent the first few years of their childhood, maybe even their entire childhood, in France, because one of Joseph's brothers stays in France for the rest of his life. And he does move to Paris, and he works as a dental surgeon. So while there isn't a mayor of Paris...
Which would have been a great story.
Which would have been great.
I'll take dentist in Paris.
There's a dentist in Paris.
Yeah. It's not Emily in Paris, it's dentist in Paris.
It's dentist in Paris.
But that will do for me.
There's a couple more points I wanted to highlight here. One is that something I thought was interesting is that when babies are taken to be registered in Nîmes, they are presented to a local official. And when Joseph was born, his parents took him to be presented to the deputy mayor of Nîmes. So I wondered if perhaps he had a copy of his birth record and someone caught that word in the document, one of his children maybe, and that's how the mayor that's how the rumour about the mayor started.
That's how it started, and that's how it filtered down.
Yeah.
But it's a great story. And that is something that, honestly, the minute I leave this podcast, I will be on the phone to Dad because, of course, it's his family.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's incredible. Fantastique.
You are French.